Hey everyone, I'm Steve, and welcome to All Things Architecture, the stories behind the buildings and the people who created them. And now, let's get to our story. Fazlur and Bruce were sitting at their table at the prestigious Chicago club for lunch one day, doing what they always did. They were talking shop. On this particular day, they were discussing their ideas for their latest project, a corporate headquarters for one of America's biggest retailers, in the heart of Chicago's Loop. No big deal, right? After all, they and the firm they were partners in, Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, had developed several prominent office buildings. And while designing these projects, the two men had developed a truly unique and special partnership that seemingly blended engineering and architecture into one. To outsiders, their partnership might have seemed unusual. Fazlur was born poor in what is now Bangladesh. He didn't see his first skyscraper until he was 21 years old, and was now the most prominent structural engineer in the country, if not the world. He was also one of the kindest men you'd ever meet, who had a love for poetry. Bruce, on the other hand, was a strong-minded architect with a passion for drawing that dated back to his youth in Puerto Rico. He was charming, outgoing, with a touch of ego. But for their seemingly different personalities, they had plenty in common, not the least of which was their equally incurable desire to dare the impossible, to create buildings that not only soared to new heights, but made daring leaps toward the future of architecture. This was the perfect challenge for them, because their client was, at the time, a forward-looking company that knew what they wanted. They wanted a corporate headquarters of the future, and a place that their company could grow into. They had done a year's worth of research with the help of an early computer to determine how much space they would need not only now, but 20 years into the future. From their research, they told the two men they needed over 3 million square feet of office space. To put that in perspective, that's 1 million square feet more than the tallest building in the world at the time, the Empire State Building. Oh, and another thing. The client also demanded that the floors of the building be large and unobstructed by columns. And there lay the challenge. To have over 3 million square feet of office space, the building would have to be tall, very tall. And how then do you go about designing such a tall tower and make it structurally tough enough to stand up against any forces it might face, particularly wind, and also make it financially viable to build? The answer came rather quickly to them. They decided the best type of construction was to use a system called tube construction. It was first pioneered by Fazlur while teacher at Illinois Institute of Technology, in which the steel framework that held up the building was moved to the exterior. This meant that a building's interior wasn't a vast forest of support columns as was traditional in other skyscrapers. The system made building taller possible, and more economical as it required less steel. The biggest and most prominent attempt at this type of construction was found just a few blocks away from them at the Hancock Center, which featured a tapered design and crisscrossed beams that allowed the building to rise to be the tallest building in the city. The engineering of the building also added a richness to the architecture because it created a dynamic facade that proudly showcased its construction. Tube construction was the perfect system for this new tower. But there was yet another issue they had to resolve. The tower they were proposing to build was going to be much larger in both floor area and in height than the Hancock Center, which would make the tube system almost impossible. So there they were, sitting there at their table at an impasse. That was until Fazlur suggested that instead of building one large tube, they could split the building up into a series of independent tubes that were joined together. Bruce thought for a second and saw the potential. Are you saying that I could take a set of these different tubes and put them at different heights? Fazlur nodded. Bruce looked across the table and reached for a pack of cigarettes that were there on the white tablecloth. He unwrapped them and opened the lid, revealing the contents inside. He turned them upside down, tapped the bottom until the cigarettes were free, and then he held them in a bundle in his hand and began adjusting them into various configurations and different heights. The two men looked at each other and both grinned. They knew they'd hit onto something special. They finished their lunch that day and went back to their office to work out a scheme. Within a few weeks, they had a model and a general plan. They showed the design to their client, and while the various partners of the firm were sitting there proud of their design, Bruce pulled out a pine model of the tower and mentioned to the client that since the building was so close to being the tallest building in the world, why not just go for it? After all, Chicago was the birthplace of the skyscraper, so why not just bring the title of tallest tower back to its hometown? The innovative clients beamed, and without hesitation, agreed to make the building ever so taller. A couple of weeks later, the client made the announcement that they would continue their innovative nature by putting their name on the tallest building in the world. Over the next few years, the form, once only represented in cigarettes, started to take shape in glass and steel, and slowly rose into the Chicago sky. When it opened in 1974, it amazed the world as one of the most innovative skyscrapers anywhere. It marked one of the last great modernist buildings and would revolutionize skyscraper design. And it solidified the merits of tube construction. As for the client, they occupied the building for about 20 years before moving out in 1992. The client would leave their namesake headquarters officially in 2003 as the company began to fall into bankruptcy. As for the tower, it remains a landmark in the city of Chicago. It remained the tallest building in the world until the Petronas Towers opened in 1998, though many Chicagoans would dispute that claim given that the tower had a higher floor height than the Petronas Towers. Nevertheless, it remained the tallest building in America for decades, and more than height, it showcased the brilliance of its visionary designers that dared to create a building that showcased the exciting possibilities of blending architecture and engineering, creating a totally new dimension to architecture. If only the company who commissioned it and whose name used to be on the building, the once visionary company, had kept the innovative spirit that powered their architect, Bruce Graham, and their structural engineer, Dr. Fazlur Kahn, to create that towering symbol of innovation, they might still occupy that tower. The tower formerly known as the Sears Tower. And that's our story. Thank you for watching. For more information on the Sears Tower and modern architecture, visit arcbydesign.com. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram. And as always, be sure to like and subscribe for more great stories from the world of architecture. Anyway, I'm Steve. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time here on All Things Architecture.